At Thanksgiving, my Mills secretly DNA tested my kids, then called me trash at the table. The whole family laughed, saying my oldest looked too different. When she revealed the results, she smirked, until I said, "You were right. She's not his." She had no idea what that actually meant, until I told them the whole truth. And then? The room went silent. This has been a long time coming, and I'm still shaking as I type this. I, 38F, have been married to my husband Rick, 41M, for 16 years. We have 3 children, Sophia, 15F, Ethan, 12M, and Lily, 8F. My mother-in-law, Diane, 67F, has always been difficult. That's putting it mildly. She's the type of woman who believes her precious son could have done better than me because I didn't come from money like their family did. They're not ultra-wealthy, but comfortable enough that Diane has developed that particular brand of suburban entitlement that makes her think she's better than everyone else. The tension between us has always been there, simmering beneath awkward holiday dinners and backhanded compliments about my parenting, my career as a high school English teacher, or pretty much anything else she could criticize. "Oh, you still teach? I always thought you'd move into administration by now, or those store-bought cookies look adequate." I always made homemade treats for Richard when he was growing up. The usual death by 1,000 cuts that mothers-in-law like Diane specialize in. But what happened at Thanksgiving yesterday has forever changed our family dynamic, and I'm still processing the fallout. I never thought she would stoop so low, but I guess I shouldn't be surprised. The signs were always there, I just didn't want to see them. Before I get to the Thanksgiving disaster, there's something important you need to understand about our family. Something that Rick and I have kept private from his extended family for reasons that will soon become obvious. Rick is not Sophia's biological father. When I was 22, I was briefly engaged to a man named James. We met in college, and our relationship was passionate but volatile. I mistook his jealousy for devotion and his possessiveness for love. It wasn't until we were living together that I began to see the red flags. He would check my phone, question me about male colleagues, and gradually isolate me from my friends. One night, things turned dark. We had gone out to celebrate his promotion at work. The evening started well enough, nice restaurant, candlelight, wine. The waiter was friendly, just doing his job. But James kept watching every interaction with increasingly narrowed eyes. "You're enjoying his attention, aren't you?" he muttered as the waiter walked away after refilling my water glass. "What?" "No, he's just being polite," I said, confused by the sudden shift in mood. James was silent for the rest of dinner, a tense, coiled silence that made my stomach knot. I'd seen this building storm before, but it had never been this bad. On the drive home, he recounted every smile, every thank you, every moment my eyes had supposedly lingered too long on the waiter. By the time we pulled into our apartment complex, I was apologizing for things I hadn't done. When we got inside, the argument escalated. I tried to defuse the situation, saying I was tired and wanted to go to bed. That's when he grabbed my phone, demanding to see my messages, convinced I must be cheating. When I reached for my phone, he shoved me hard against the wall. "You're not going anywhere until we sort this out," he said, his voice frighteningly calm. What followed was the longest 30 minutes of my life. He became violent, and I ended up in the emergency room with a broken wrist, fractured ribs, and bruises that wouldn't fade for weeks. The attending nurse had seen enough domestic violence to recognize it immediately and gently suggested I speak with a social worker. With their help, I pressed charges, broke off the engagement, and got a restraining order. 3 weeks later, sitting alone in a new apartment in a different part of town, I stared at the 2 pink lines on the pregnancy test, and my world shifted again. I was pregnant with Sophia. I was terrified and alone. My parents had passed away in a car accident during my sophomore year of college, and I had no close family to turn to. My brother was deployed overseas, and we weren't particularly close even before that. I made the decision to move to a new city to start fresh, determined to protect my unborn child from ever knowing the violence of her biological father. That's where I met Rick. It was a rainy Tuesday in April, and I was struggling to carry a second-hand rocking chair up to my 3rd-floor walk-up. 7 months pregnant, I probably looked as miserable as I felt, swollen ankles, hair plastered to my forehead from the rain, and utterly alone. "Need a hand with that?" I turned to see a tall man with kind blue eyes and a gentle smile. He lived in 3B, across the hall from my new apartment. I'd seen him in passing but hadn't spoken to him yet. "I've got it," I said automatically, the wariness that had become my constant companion making me hesitant to accept help. He didn't push, just nodded and said, "I'm right here if you change your mind." "That looks heavy." After another flight of stairs, my arms trembling from exertion, I finally relented. "Actually, if you don't mind." Rick, though I didn't know his name yet, took over carrying the rocking chair effortlessly. As we reached my floor, he introduced himself. "I'm Rick Wright, apartment 3B. Just moved in last month." Emily Taylor, I replied, fumbling with my keys. Just moved in last week. Well, welcome to the building. It's not fancy, but the landlord's decent and the water pressure's good, he joked, setting the chair down exactly where I indicated in what would become the nursery. It could have ended there, a simple neighborly interaction. But the next morning, I found a small welcome basket outside my door with herbal tea, crackers, and a note. My sister swore by these for morning sickness when she was pregnant. Welcome to the building. Rick, 3B. It was the first genuinely kind gesture anyone had shown me in months. We became friends first, real friends. He would check in regularly, bringing me groceries when morning sickness kept me housebound well into my third trimester. When my online order for a crib arrived, he not only helped carry the box up 3 flights of stairs but spent an entire Saturday assembling it while I sorted through tiny onesies and receiving blankets. He never asked about my past or the absence of a partner, though I eventually told him pieces of my story when I felt safe enough. He listened without judgment, offering support without pressure. When my water broke at 2 a.m. on a stormy night in June, Rick was the one I called in a panic. He drove me to the hospital, waited patiently in the waiting room for 14 hours, and was the first person besides me to hold Sophia when the nurse brought her out for visitors. We started falling for each other, but Rick was careful to take things slow. He knew what I'd been through and never pressured me. Our first date wasn't even a conventional date. He helped me baby-proof my apartment when Sophia started crawling, and afterward, we ordered takeout and ate on my living room floor while Sophia slept in her portable crib nearby. He brought me a single sunflower instead of roses, saying he thought I might like something bright and resilient. He was right. We had our first kiss that night, after he'd spent 20 minutes getting a stubborn cabinet lock installed correctly. It was sweet and unassuming, just like him. By the time Sophia was 6 months old, we were officially dating, though Rick spent more time at our place than his own, becoming a constant, steady presence in our lives. He was there for Sophia's first word, Dada, ironically enough, her first steps, her first tooth. He documented everything with the enthusiasm of a parent who didn't want to miss a moment. When she turned 1, we threw a small party in the park. As Sophia napped in her stroller afterward, Rick and I sat on a park bench, watching ducks glide across the pond. I've been thinking, he said, reaching for my hand. This past year has been the happiest of my life. I smiled, leaning into his shoulder. Mine too. He turned to face me then, his expression serious but tender. I want to be Sophia's dad. Legally, officially. If you'll have me. Are you proposing? I asked, my heart racing. I'm proposing a family, he said, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. I know I didn't help create her, but I've loved her every day of her life. I want to make it official, both with you and with her. The ring was his grandmother's, a simple solitaire diamond in a vintage setting. Nothing flashy or ostentatious, just timeless and genuine, like Rick himself. I said yes through tears, and when Sophia woke from her nap, Rick scooped her up and promised her he'd be the best dad he could possibly be. We were married 3 months later in a small ceremony at the courthouse, with Sophia in a tiny flower girl dress, chewing on silk rose petals. Rick's parents flew in for the weekend but flew back immediately after the ceremony due to his father's work commitments. They seemed nice enough, if a bit formal and reserved. I attributed their stiffness to not knowing us well, never imagining how Diane's attitude would calcify over the years. Rick legally adopted Sophia when we got married. We changed her last name to match ours, and he's the only father she's ever known. James signed away his parental rights in exchange for not having to pay child support. He wanted nothing to do with either of us after the restraining order was filed. Honestly, it was the one decent thing he ever did for us. We decided that when Sophia was older, we would tell her the truth about her biological father, but in an age-appropriate way. When she turned 13, we sat her down together and explained everything. She took it remarkably well, asking thoughtful questions and processing the information with a maturity that made me incredibly proud. She said that Rick was her real dad no matter what, and she wasn't interested in knowing James. What nobody else in the family knows is that 2 years ago, James died of a drug overdose in a motel room 3 states away. His sister contacted me through social media to let me know, figuring I'd want to be informed despite our history. Sophia knows this too, but we decided not to share this information with the extended family since it wasn't their business. Rick's parents have never known about James or the adoption. They live in another state, and when they first met me, Sophia was just a baby. Rick and I decided to keep things simple, and frankly, Diane always seemed like the type to use such information against me somehow. One more crucial detail, Sophia looks a lot like me. She has my dark curly hair, olive skin tone, and hazel eyes. Rick, Ethan, and Lily are all fair-skinned with straight blonde hair and blue eyes, taking after Rick's Scandinavian heritage. Diane has made jokes about this over the years, asking if the hospital mixed up the babies when Sophia was born, or saying things like, "It's amazing how genetics work, isn't it?" She doesn't have a single right family trait. We shut that down every time, but the comments never completely stopped. This year, Thanksgiving was at Diane and Frank's, my father-in-law, sprawling house in the suburbs. They'd moved from their modest ranch-style home to a 5-bedroom McMansion in an exclusive gated community last year, after Frank's retirement package turned out to be more generous than expected. Diane had spent most of our phone calls since then dropping not-so-subtle hints about their new granite countertops, sub-zero refrigerator, and the guest room that was always ready for the grandchildren, though some might be more comfortable than others, with a pointed emphasis I couldn't miss. The whole extended family was there: Rick's 2 sisters, Catherine, 44F, and Jennifer, 39F, and their husbands, their combined 5 children ranging from ages 6 to 19, and Frank's brother Gerald and his wife Patricia. 17 people in total, plus us 5. Things were tense from the moment we arrived. The security guard at the gate had apparently not been given our name, resulting in an awkward 10-minute wait while Diane was contacted to authorize our entry. "So sorry," she said breezily when we finally made it to the house, though the smirk tugging at her lips suggested it wasn't entirely an accident. The good help is so hard to find these days. Once inside, Diane made a show of hugging Ethan and Lily tightly while giving Sophia a pat on the shoulder. She gushed over how tall Ethan was getting and how Lily looked just like her father, thank goodness, while barely acknowledging Sophia's new haircut or the honor roll certificate she'd brought to show her grandparents. I bit my tongue, as I always did. Rick squeezed my hand, his silent signal for "I see it too, but let's not make a scene." "Sophia, why don't you take your siblings to the game room downstairs?" Diane suggested, though her tone made it less a suggestion and more a dismissal. "The adults need to catch up." Sophia, ever perceptive, glanced at me questioningly. I nodded slightly, and she led the other kids away, her shoulders stiff with the awareness of being singled out yet again. "She's turning into quite the little mother hen," Diane remarked as soon as they were out of earshot. "I hope she doesn't get too attached to playing mommy. Boys don't like girls who are bossy, you know." "She's not bossy, she's responsible," Rick corrected firmly. "And she's on the honor roll again this semester. We're very proud of her." Was Diane's only response as she turned to Catherine to compliment her new highlights. The house was decorated impeccably, as always. Diane had hired a professional decorator this year, making sure to mention it several times during the pre-dinner small talk. "It's just so much easier to have someone with taste handle these things," she said, looking pointedly at the homemade centerpiece I'd brought as a hostess gift. I'd spent hours crafting it with the kids, using pine cones and autumn leaves we'd collected from our backyard. It was currently sitting on a side table in the hallway, not deemed worthy of the main dining table. Dinner started normally enough. The food was excellent, say what you will about Diane, but the woman can cook, and conversation flowed easily at first. The kids were at a separate table in the adjacent sunroom, while the adults occupied the formal dining room with its crystal chandelier and antique china that had been in the Wright family for generations, something Diane mentioned at least twice a year. About halfway through the meal, I noticed Diane kept glancing at me with this odd smirk, the kind that made my stomach clench. She was being overly polite, which always meant trouble. When she offered me the first slice of her special pumpkin pie, before serving Rick or Frank, which was unheard of, I knew something was off. Then she clinked her glass dramatically with her sterling silver knife. "I have something important to discuss," she announced, looking directly at me. The table went quiet. Even the kids in the other room seemed to sense the tension, their voices dropping to whispers. "I've been concerned for some time about something, and as the matriarch of this family, I believe it's my responsibility to protect our family legacy and ensure the Wright family bloodline remains untainted." My stomach dropped. Rick frowned, putting down his fork. "Mom, what are you talking about?" Diane reached into her cardigan pocket and pulled out several folded papers. "I had some tests done. For the children's sake, of course." "What tests?" Rick asked, his voice sharpening. "DNA tests," she said calmly, as if announcing she'd ordered dessert. I was concerned about certain inconsistencies in appearances. "I collected samples from all 3 of your children last month when they stayed overnight." The room went deadly silent. I felt the blood drain from my face. "You did what?" Rick stood up so quickly his chair toppled backward, the crash echoing through the dining room. "Sit down, Richard," Frank said firmly, using Rick's full name, always a bad sign. "Let your mother finish." Diane smoothed the papers on the table, her manicured nails tapping against the results. "The test confirmed what I've suspected for years." She turned to me, her eyes glittering with malice poorly disguised as concern. "Sophia is not Rick's biological child." All eyes turned to me. My hands were shaking so badly I had to put down my water glass before I spilled it. "How dare you?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. Then louder, "How dare you test our children without our consent?" Diane ignored me, addressing the table at large. I always knew there was something off about her. She doesn't look like a right. And now we know why. She looked around the table with a triumphant expression. She's been lying to us for 15 years. Passing off another man's child as a right. Rick's sister Catherine laughed nervously. I mean, we all kind of wondered. Sophia looks so different. I always said she didn't look like she belonged, agreed Jennifer, who had made similar comments over the years. Poor Rick, said Frank, shaking his head. Raising another man's child all these years without knowing. I've known from day one, Rick said through gritted teeth. The table erupted in shocked gasps and overlapping voices. Patricia, always the gossip, leaned forward eagerly. You knew she wasn't yours? And you stayed? Of course she's mine, Rick snapped. I've raised her since she was born. Diane's face twisted with disgust as she looked at me. So you trapped my son with another man's child? You're nothing but trash. White trash that fooled my son into raising your bastard. The room exploded with overlapping voices, some defending Diane, others looking uncomfortable but not speaking up. Rick was shouting at his mother while Frank was yelling at Rick to respect her. Gerald looked like he wanted to disappear into his mashed potatoes, and Patricia was frantically texting, no doubt spreading the drama to her own family in real time. From the other room, I could hear Sophia ask, "Why is everyone yelling?" And my heart broke. I couldn't let her walk in on this. I stood up slowly, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. The sound cut through the chaos, and everyone fell silent again, staring at me. You're right, Diane, I said, my voice surprisingly steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. Sophia is not biologically Rick's daughter. Diane's face twisted into a smirk. Finally, the truth comes out. I continued, and Rick has known this since before we got married. He legally adopted her when she was a year old. The smirk faltered slightly, but she rallied. So you admit you lied to this family for over 15 years? You've been passing off another man's child as a right? Did you cheat on my son? Something inside me snapped. Years of enduring her subtle jabs, her preferential treatment of my other children, her constant undermining, it all came to a head. Sophia is a right. Rick is her father in every way that matters. And yes, we've known all along she has a different biological father. We were waiting until she was old enough to understand before telling her, which we did 2 years ago. I took a deep breath, then delivered the blow I'd been holding back. Since you're so interested in the truth, Diane, here it is. Sophia's biological father was an abusive man who put me in the hospital before Rick ever came into my life. I left him to protect my unborn child, and I pressed charges against him. Your son, your wonderful son that you think I'm not good enough for, he stepped up and became her father when her biological father couldn't be bothered. He chose to be her dad because that's what real men do. They don't need a DNA test to know what family means. The room was so quiet you could hear the children laughing in the next room, oblivious to the drama unfolding. And one more thing, I continued, my voice ice cold. Sophia's biological father died 2 years ago of a drug overdose in a motel room after years of addiction. So your little DNA revelation? It changes absolutely nothing about our family. It just shows what kind of person you really are, someone who would secretly collect DNA from children, violate their privacy, and then humiliate a 15-year-old girl at Thanksgiving dinner to score points in some twisted game no one else is playing. Diane's face had gone from triumphant to stunned. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. I was just trying to protect our family. No, Rick interrupted, coming to stand beside me. You were trying to hurt my wife and my daughter. There is no excuse for what you've done. But the family bloodline, she sputtered. Is none of your business, Rick finished firmly. Sophia is my daughter. Period. End of discussion. And if you ever try to suggest otherwise again, or make her feel like she doesn't belong in this family, that will be the last time you see any of us. He turned to me. Let's get the kids. We're leaving. As we gathered our coats and collected our confused children, Frank followed us to the foyer. You're overreacting. Diane was just concerned about the family. She had a right to know. Rick stared at his father, disbelief etched on his face. Dad, she collected our children's DNA without permission. Do you understand how violated we feel? How illegal that is? It wasn't illegal, Frank scoffed. They're her grandchildren. Actually, I said quietly, it is illegal in this state to DNA test minors without parental consent. But we're not going to press charges if she stays away from our family. Frank's face paled. He clearly hadn't considered this angle. You wouldn't. Try me, I said, meeting his gaze steadily. Diane crossed a line today that can't be uncrossed. As we were leaving, Sophia approached me, looking worried. Mom? Is everything okay? Why are we leaving early? I put my arm around her shoulders. Grandma Diane said some unkind things, sweetheart. We'll talk more at home. Diane appeared in the hallway then, her face streaked with tears, whether from genuine remorse or being exposed, I couldn't tell. "Sophia," she called. "I'm sorry if..." "No," Rick said firmly, positioning himself between his mother and our daughter. "You don't get to speak to her right now." We left, the sound of the door closing behind us with a finality that felt appropriate. On the drive home, Rick and I explained to the kids in age-appropriate terms what had happened. Sophia, mature beyond her years, took it surprisingly well. "So Grandma found out you're not my biological dad and freaked out?" she asked Rick. "She already knew I wasn't your biological father," Rick said, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "She was just trying to hurt us by exposing it publicly." Sophia nodded thoughtfully. "Well, that's stupid. Everyone who matters already knows. And you're my real dad anyway." Rick's eyes met mine in the rearview mirror, filled with tears. I reached over and squeezed his arm. "But why does Grandma hate Mom so much?" Ethan asked, always perceptive. Rick sighed. "She doesn't hate Mom. She has certain ideas about family that are outdated. And she has trouble accepting that people might have different values than she does." "She's mean," Lily declared with the straightforward honesty of an 8-year-old. "She always gives Sophia the smallest piece of cake." I couldn't help but laugh at that, tension finally breaking. "You noticed that too, huh?" "Everyone notices," Sophia said, rolling her eyes. "Grandma's not exactly subtle." The conversation shifted then, with Ethan asking if this meant we could have ice cream for dinner instead of leftover turkey. The answer was yes, and Lily wondering if we could start decorating for Christmas early this year to cheer ourselves up, also yes. By the time we pulled into our driveway, the mood had lightened considerably. We ordered pizza, built a blanket fort in the living room, and had an impromptu movie marathon. Watching my children laugh together, I was struck by how resilient they were, how resilient we all were as a family unit. Later that night, after the kids were in bed, Rick and I sat on the porch swing, wrapped in blankets against the November chill. Our breath created small clouds in the cold air, and the neighborhood was quiet except for the occasional distant barking of a dog. The string lights we'd hung along the porch railing for the fall season cast a soft, warm glow over us. "I'm so sorry," he said, his voice breaking as he stared out into the darkness. "I never thought she'd go this far. Collecting DNA from our children. It's not just crossing a boundary, it's obliterating it." "It's not your fault," I assured him, resting my head on his shoulder. "You can't control what she does." "No, but I should have set firmer boundaries years ago. All those jokes about Sophia's appearance, the way she constantly excludes her from family traditions. I kept making excuses for her behavior, thinking she'd eventually come around, that she'd see how amazing Sophia is if given enough time." He sighed heavily, rubbing his temples. "I was wrong. I've been wrong for 15 years, and Sophia has paid the price for my cowardice." "Hey," I said, turning his face toward mine. "You are not a coward. You stood up for us today when it mattered most. You chose us, chose our family, over her manipulation. I should have done it sooner. Maybe. But you did it. That's what matters." I paused, considering my next words carefully. "You know, in some ways, maybe this needed to happen. Now everything's out in the open. No more walking on eggshells, no more pretending not to notice the little digs and slights." He nodded slowly. "You're right. It's almost relieving, in a weird way. Like this weight I didn't even realize I was carrying is finally gone." We sat in companionable silence for a while, the swing creaking gently beneath us. From inside, we could hear the faint sound of Sophia's music drifting from her bedroom window. The familiar melody was comforting, a reminder of the normal, loving home we'd built despite the chaos outside it. "What do we do now?" I finally asked, voicing the question that had been hovering between us all evening. Rick took my hand, intertwining our fingers. "Now we prioritize our kids and their well-being. Sophia knows we're in her corner. That's what matters most." "And your parents?" "They've made their choice," he said firmly. "They chose their prejudice over their grandchildren. I won't subject our kids to that environment anymore." I nodded, feeling a mixture of sadness and relief. "I agree. I've been thinking," Rick continued, his voice thoughtful. "Maybe we should take that trip to the mountains for Christmas, like we've been talking about for years. Rent a cabin, build snowmen, drink hot chocolate by the fire. Start some new traditions that are just ours." "I'd love that," I said, smiling at the thought. "The kids would too." Then it's settled. Right Family Christmas 2.0, featuring all the rights, because family is who we choose, not who shares our DNA. I leaned up and kissed him softly. "I choose you. Every day. And I choose you," he whispered back. "And our 3 perfect children." We stayed on the porch swing until the night air grew too cold, talking through logistics for the coming weeks and months, How to handle future family events, what to tell the extended family, how to support Sophia through this new challenge. It was a difficult conversation, but one filled with love and resolve. By the time we went inside, we had a plan, united as we'd always been. Since yesterday, Rick's sisters have both called to apologize for not standing up to their mother. The conversations were tearful and raw. Catherine called first, her voice strained as she admitted she's been afraid of Diane her whole life. And Jennifer confessed she's been in therapy for years to deal with her mother's controlling behavior. Both asked if we could meet up separately from their parents, saying they wanted to maintain relationships with their nieces and nephew. We're considering it. Frank sent a text saying we were welcome for Christmas dinner once everyone calms down, to which Rick responded with a simple no. Diane has called 17 times. We haven't answered. This morning, we received an email from her with a subject line "I was only trying to protect the family." Rick deleted it without reading it. Then he blocked her number on all our phones, including the kids. We're spending the rest of the weekend as a family, our real family, watching movies, eating leftover pizza, and playing board games. Sophia asked if she could invite her best friend over, and we said yes. Life goes on. I don't know what the future holds for our relationship with Rick's parents. Part of me thinks this was a final straw after years of microaggressions and boundary violations. Another part of me recognizes they're still the kids' grandparents, and completely cutting them off might not be the right answer long term. But for now, distance seems necessary for our family's healing. What I do know is this: family isn't defined by DNA. It's defined by love, respect, and showing up for each other. Rick showed up for Sophia and me 16 years ago, and he's been showing up every day since. And that, not some family bloodline, is what truly matters. Wow, I didn't expect this post to blow up like it did. Thank you all for your supportive comments and for the awards. Gold? Platinum? Seriously? I've been reading them to Rick, and they've helped him feel validated in standing up to his family, something he's struggled with his entire life. To answer some common questions, yes, we're considering legal action regarding the DNA testing. We have a consultation with a lawyer next week. While we probably won't pursue criminal charges, we want to know our options. Several of you mentioned restraining orders, which we're definitely considering given Diane's history of boundary violations. No, we don't plan on attending Christmas at Frank and Diane's. We've decided to start our own traditions this year. We're thinking of renting a cabin in the mountains and inviting Rick's sisters and their families, but only if they understand and respect our boundaries regarding Frank and Diane. Several of you asked about Sophia and how she's coping. She's actually handling it remarkably well. This afternoon, she said something that made me so proud. "Mom, I'm kind of glad Grandma did this. Now everyone knows the truth, and we don't have to pretend anymore. Plus, I got to see Dad stand up for us." Kids are resilient, especially when they know they're loved. For those suggesting family therapy, we're already looking into it. Not to reconcile with Diane, but to help our kids process everything. A few sessions might also help Rick work through some of the guilt he's feeling about cutting ties with his parents, even though he knows it's the right decision for our family. And finally, to the person who asked if Rick has real children besides Sophia, all 3 of our children are real. Family is more than biology. I thought that was the entire point of my post. I also want to address something a few commenters brought up: whether Rick's sisters deserve a second chance. I'm torn on this. On one hand, they've been complicit in Diane's behavior for years. On the other hand, they've both reached out to apologize and seem genuinely remorseful. Catherine sent Sophia a beautiful text message today telling her how proud she is to be her aunt and how much she loves her. Jennifer has invited Sophia to stay with her for a weekend in the city next month to attend a Broadway show, something they've been planning for months. So for now, we're cautiously maintaining those relationships while establishing clear boundaries. Many of you asked what kind of grandmother would DNA test her grandchildren without permission. I wish I had a logical answer, but I don't. Diane has always been controlling and status conscious. I think in her mind, the right family name carries some kind of special significance that must be protected. It's ridiculous, of course, they're upper middle class suburbanites, not royalty. But in Diane's world, appearances are everything, and Sophia has always been a visible reminder that her perfect son made choices she didn't approve of. What's ironic is that if Diane had simply accepted Sophia from the beginning, we probably would have told her the truth years ago. But she showed us who she was through her behavior, and we protected our daughter accordingly. I don't regret that for a second. Thank you all for the support and advice. It means more than you know to feel validated after years of doubting myself in the face of Diane's manipulations. I'll update again after we speak with a lawyer. Edit, gold? Platinum? Thank you, kind strangers. Never thought my family drama would earn me Reddit awards, but here we are. Life is strange sometimes. Edit 2, to clarify for those asking, yes, Sophia knows everything about her biological father, including his death. We've always been honest with her in age-appropriate ways. She's been in therapy since we told her the full story at 13, and her therapist says she's processing it all in a healthy way. Sophia actually said yesterday that she's grateful to have a dad like Rick who chose to love her rather than being stuck with a biological father who was abusive. Edit 3. A few people have asked why we didn't tell Rick's family the truth from the beginning. Honestly, we considered it many times over the years. But every time Diane made one of her jokes about Sophia looking different or not being a real right, it reinforced our decision to keep the information private. We were protecting Sophia from exactly the kind of reaction that ended up happening anyway. The difference is that now she's old enough to understand and process it, rather than growing up feeling less than because of something beyond her control. Final edit. I've read every single comment, all 3.7k of them, wow, and I'm overwhelmed by the support. For those concerned about the legality of DNA testing minors without consent, it varies by state, but in many places, it falls under laws regarding unauthorized genetic testing or invasion of privacy. We've spoken with a lawyer who confirmed we have grounds for action, but we're still deciding if we want to put the kids through that process. For now, we're focusing on healing as a family and establishing new boundaries with Rick's relatives. Many of you have shared your own stories of family estrangement or complex family dynamics, and they've been both comforting and illuminating. It helps to know we're not alone in choosing family peace over family obligation. Thanks again, Reddit. You've given me strength I didn't know I needed.